And we are on air, or in air. We are airborne here in the heartland of America, where we've got spring on the advance, and of course the political year. We've got lunacy on the advance, and
a little hot air.
Yes, a lot of hot air, and I think that this is one of the best political years I've ever witnessed, if you are somebody who is into A Course in Miracles, because I can remember when I first was reading in the Course, and it was telling me that everybody, including myself, was categorically mad as a March hare, as it were, when we're in this realm. And, you have a little bit of a resistance to that idea when you first encounter it. Well, I'm saying, and my friends are saying, everybody else is probably a little bit nutty. But, in a political year, wow. I mean, you get to see the depth of this kind of a desperation that the ego has going on to convince us all that we are separate, and that we need to guard ourselves against each other and ultimately defeat the evildoers around us, and then eventually, kill them. That's, even though, the rhetoric is, oh, we have to be forgiving, we have to be this, we have to be that. The ego is ultimately the darkest outcome possible, is what it is trying to attain.
Yeah. Well, I think you're absolutely right, Chris. We do need to eliminate our political enemies, and then we can remake the world to be a perfect utopia.
Yes. Well, Jesus was all about a utopian world. In order to become a member of that cult of Jesus back in that era, you had to get rid of all of your possessions and join the community. And that, of course, is communism in its purest form, not the communism that the Soviets practiced, or that China practices, or Cuba practices. And the other day I was having a discussion with my grandson, Jonathan, who is 17. And out of nowhere, the boy says, well, this whole thing would be resolved if we had communism instituted here throughout the world. He says, it's the only true utopian society. And I thought, my God, my grandchild is becoming a profound thinker right in front of me. So awesome. How cool was that?
Yeah. And what I think, we're talking about here is this idea of the real world that the Course is pointing us towards, which is that world where we're not projecting out our fear and our anger and our jealousy onto other bodies, or even onto this body we think that we are, but we are cleansing our mind of all these false thoughts. And as we do that, we can still be in the world, but we don't take it seriously. And I think it's kind of a hard thing to realize. And obviously here we are a few days before Easter, and that is also one of the main topics we're going to go into today, because the story of Jesus' crucifixion is a really hard one. The story seems to be one of suffering, and the Christian take on that suffering is like, oh, he did that for us. Like, Jesus is such a good guy. He was tortured just so we could all be happy. And that's definitely not the message that we get through the Course. The message is basically the opposite of that.
Exactly. And the thing I'll interject here is that, that whole line of thought comes from the old God that the Jews had envisioned, a God that demands a blood sacrifice, a God that demands death in order to feed itself and to propel itself and to assuage itself. And that's really a hideous, hideous vision of God. And of course, Jesus was here to say, that's the old thought, that's the old law. I'm not here to support that old law. I'm here to fulfill it, to end it, and to bring us to an enlightened state of who God is and what God is all about.
I think that's absolutely true. And throughout the course, we were given an image of a loving God, of a kind God, to replace this really hideous God that, as you were describing, is much closer to some of the horror movies you might see in the theaters today than what God is in any way. So this section, actually, we're going to touch on is chapter 20 in the text, and the section is called "The Vision of Holiness." And it starts right off talking about this week that we're in. He says, "This is Palm Sunday, the celebration of victory and the acceptance of the truth. Let us not spend this holy week brooding on the crucifixion of God's Son, but happily in the celebration of his release. For Easter is the sign of peace, not pain. A slain Christ has no meaning, but a risen Christ becomes the symbol of the Son of God's forgiveness on himself, the sign he looks upon himself as healed and whole." So already here you can see that, we're not talking about the standard version of the Christian story. We're talking about the Easter story as a symbol of the resurrection of truth within our minds, because that is what Jesus experienced in his life, was the resurrection of that truth. And we kind of say resurrection because it kind of implies that it was there before, and in truth it never really left. But we are becoming aware of it once again. And as we become aware of it once again, then the world stops having such an effect on us. We stop being hurt by people's anger, by people's sadness, by people's sorrow. And our response to these things becomes more and more consistently one of kindness, one of compassion, one of open-heartedness.
That's absolutely true. And, in a lot of regions around the country, I know in Spearfish, South Dakota, and Colorado Springs, I believe they have a big festival. They have the Passion Play, what they call Passion Play. And in Chicago, many years ago, I happened to be on Good Friday. I happened to be, transiting down from one side of the city to the other, and I got stuck in a traffic jam. And the reason for the traffic jam was there was this fellow who was, I believe it was a Puerto Rican neighborhood or Dominican neighborhood. And there was the guy dressed up like Jesus, and he had a cross. And, they had the big procession going down a main artery so that they closed off traffic for probably 45 minutes or an hour. And it was all about the gore. It was all about the blood and the suffering and how hideous this whole thing could possibly be. And it was, I was sitting in a bus watching all this and thinking, my God, these people are just wallowing in the darkest possible interpretation of what Jesus's life was all about. And to look at a life not encapsulated by, that 1 8 or 9 hour episode, but to see that transcendence that came, in the ascension and in the resurrection, it shifts your thinking from an extreme level of negativity to the ultimate level of expectation of a good outcome to this story. And I think that's really what we have to do, is we have to maintain our embracing, our embrace of the story of not only the resurrection, but ultimately the ascension, where we were told that the light that Jesus stepped into was so bright that it was brighter than anything any human had ever seen before. And that's really a magnificent story.
Yeah. And I think it's symbolized by a lot of these paintings of Jesus where you see the kind of light around his head, because people could see that there was something more than just the body there when they experienced him. They could experience that light in some way. It came through And I think the other thing about this that's really helpful is that what Jesus attained is not unique to him. It is something that we all have the ability to achieve. And he was saying he was the way, just to let us know, like, hey, if you do what I'm doing, you're going to get where I am. Not that he was something, required on the path, but just that he was, as the Course calls it, an elder brother to help us along our journey. So this section is just so gorgeous. I'm just going to keep going here. This week begins with palms and ends with lilies. The white and holy sign the Son of God is innocent. Let no dark sign of crucifixion intervene between the journey and its purpose, between the acceptance of the truth and its expression. This week we celebrate life, not death, and we honor the perfect purity of the Son of God and not his sins. Offer your brother the gift of lilies, not the crown of thorns, the gift of love, and not the gift of fear. You stand beside your brother, thorns in one hand and lilies in the other, uncertain which to give. Join now with me and throw away the thorns, offering the lilies to replace them. This Easter I would have the gift of your forgiveness offered by you to me and returned by me to you. So beautiful.
It absolutely is. And, the salient point in the second paragraph is the holy sign, the Son of God is innocent. Well, the Son of God is you and me and George Bush and Donald Trump and Bernie Sanders and Adolf Hitler. And, we just have to get over this sense of division because there is only one Son and we are it.
Yeah, I actually co-led a retreat last year called Playful Spirit Retreat. We did a couple of them, and we're planning more in the future, my friend Jason Gremley and I. And one of the things we did at the first one is we put up pictures of people on the altar. And so we had Buddha on the altar, we had Jesus on the altar, but we also had Hitler on the altar, Jeffrey Dahmer on the altar. To make the same point that we are all one, that there is no form that does not have the Christ within, that there is no one who does not have the divine truth within their soul, no matter how much they may be denying it and calling out for love in a very, very hurtful and painful way. That innocence cannot be partial for it to be true. It must be whole. It must be everywhere. It must be in everyone.
Exactly. And the real core of all of this, as far as, true understanding, is that recognition that we as physical bodies cannot experience that oneness. We have to shift our identity, our sense of self, to that next plateau and realize that we are part of one mind. And so, that's often a tremendous struggle for us, and especially, looking at it in light of the whole concept of Easter, our retention of our identity as a separate self is the one thing that ultimately causes us to be crucified. And we do it to ourselves over and over and over again. And the beauty of what Jesus was offering us was that realization that the body is nothing. It is a temporary vehicle. It's like your 1992 Chevy Impala sitting out in the front yard. It is something that ultimately will break down, fall apart, and you will step out of. And so the message of the Course is prepare yourself to make that transition. Don't fall asleep and wake up in a new body and go through that whole journey all over again.
So I know that this conversation is making Chris, that you're really a Ford guy since you gave Chevy a hard time in that last description, right?
Well, actually, I'm a Beamer guy. I like that German engineering. I like that immediate road response, and you know, and the prestige of driving a European luxury car.
No, but I really do appreciate that point you were making too, that the body is not what we are, and that we are all going to set it aside. And the question then becomes is, do we want to wait to experience this truth that we are, or do we want to hasten that awareness? And our choice is, again, always a choice to forgive our upsets or to hold on to our grievances. Sometimes we don't want to forgive our upsets. Sometimes we do want to feel aggrieved, and this political process is one. A lot of people are holding on to a lot of grievances. They're really pointing a finger, and as many people know, when you point a finger, there's one pointing out, and then there's three pointing right back at you. So I think it's helpful to realize that almost always when we're saying, I don't like this thing about someone else, I don't like the fact that Donald Trump is arrogant, really what we're saying is, there's something in me that I think is arrogant. I don't like that about myself. Now, we don't want to stop there, because otherwise then we feel like crap, oh, now I'm arrogant. But what we come to see is that there is ultimately no real arrogance. As we move through these layers, we come into the realization that because there is no duality, there's actually no other. And without someone to interact with or to have an experience in this place of form with, what does arrogance mean? What does arrogance mean in the oneness of heaven? It's a concept that it doesn't lock into anything. It doesn't fit there. And what happens is eventually all of these false ideas just sort of simmer down to nothing. And then we just step back into heaven where we never really left, but in our awareness, all of a sudden we're there again. And that's our journey that we're all on together. And I think remembering that too is helpful. Remembering that, it's not like I'm on a spiritual path and that guy is some loser.
Oh, absolutely.
We're all in this together.
And if you move a little bit further down, this I think is a brilliant part of this next series of thoughts. In chapter 4, it says, I have great need for lilies, or for, that idea of acceptance and forgiveness. And he goes on to say, for the Son of God has not forgiven me. Now that is real interesting, because once we get back to that realization that there's only one of us here, that we all are part of the one Son of God. If you are condemning, let's say, the people who set off the bombs in Belgium last week, if you are still in that state of placing guilt and blame on those people, you're basically keeping Jesus on the cross all over again. And that's what we really have to look at as we move through this Easter season, is how willing are we to allow Jesus to be removed from the cross by giving forgiveness to every soul that we hear about or encounter in this earthly realm.
Yeah. And it's amazing. I think one of the things we find as we work on this is that the Course demands a great deal of honesty with ourselves. And, we can see that in the statement. There's a workbook lesson, I want the peace of God. Well, right after he says that, he says to say these words is nothing, but to mean them is everything. Now, obviously, everyone on some, pretty conscious level says, well, I want happiness, I want peace. But what he's saying is that there's a disconnect inside of us that we may say on a level, I really want to learn this course and experience peace. But then something like this bombing, as you mentioned, happens, and all of a sudden we're angry again, we're upset, we're hurt. So there's some part of us that's still sort of tied into that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't have those feelings. I think it's really important that we acknowledge our feelings and then move through them and then release them and then hand them over to Jesus to say, you know, what I really do want here is the peace. It's not what I'm feeling right now, but it is what I want. And we become deeper and deeper in the sincerity of that request until it really is all that we want.
And it does, in fact, become our state of being, our experience, because, pardon me, because I have experienced that on a multitude of occasions where I'm in a state of turmoil. And, you know, I go back and pick up the Course and really work on recognizing that the peace of God is available to me in this moment. And it always works. So that's the beauty of it. You can see the miracle unfold in your life. You can get out of that sense of anger or frustration or self-degradation. You know, it's it's all there as a workable format, and all you have to do is stop and take the 1 or 2 very simple steps to do it.
Yeah. Simple, but not always easy. But, you know, that's why we keep practicing. You know, we keep persisting, and we get through it all. But that part is assured to us that we have already accomplished all of the forgiveness we need to, even if it's still seeming to unfold in our experience. So have hope, be hardened, because the journey is already done.
Yes, that's the mystical nature of the whole thing, is that all of this is over and done with. And we're just having a faint recall, and that recall is fading more and more as we continue to progress into the future. Well, Barrett, we've got this amazing season upon us where rabbits apparently give birth to Easter eggs that frequently show up in chocolate format, and little chickens are somehow peripherally part of that journey. And all of this, you know, is compounded and packed down and shaken down and released into the world as confusion about what Easter really means.
Mm. Yeah. I'm still waiting for that Cadbury egg. That's my salvation.
Well, you got your chocolate orange.
I did. Yes, that was a beautiful gift. Thank you. It's already all gone.
Oh, good. I'm glad that brought you a moment of joy.
If only I could get back to that, then I'd be happy.
Well, I'll have to order a couple of cases of them, evidently.
Oh man, we have such fun.
Well, anything new coming up for this next month that you want to share with us?
Yeah, actually a couple things. Tonight, for those of you who are in the Chicago area, this is Thursday, April 24th, I'm doing a past life workshop called A Soul's Journey. It is at Yoga Now Chicago at 7:30 p.m. And in a couple weeks, I'm heading down to Las Vegas for the Course in Miracles conference. I'm going to be mainly a participant, just enjoying. But if you happen to be heading down that way, I'd love to connect with you and have some time together. So definitely find me while you're there.
That is going to be awesome. And yes, Las Vegas is still tolerable. You know, another couple of months, and you're going to be dragging your butt around down there in 120-degree weather. But right now, it's kind of balmy, so you can lay out by the pool between different experiences with Course workshops.
All right, I'll bring my suit.
There you go. Well, it was wonderful chatting with you again today, and happy Easter. And to all of our viewers, you know, we send you our blessings and our love, and hope that you have beautiful colored Easter eggs and chocolate ones interspersed there too.
Yeah, definitely. If you think of Easter as the time of the rebirth of Christ, then you can realize that Christ is born in you this moment and every moment. And that's the gift that we can always give and receive, is to know that love is within us.
Absolutely. And it is eternal. We never run out of it. So I'll see you in 1 week, Barrett.
All right. I look forward to it, Chris. Have a happy Easter.
You as well. Bye.
Bye.